Welcome to Tokyo Wave, recorded in a live studio in Harajuku, Japan, with your hosts Aaron and Parker. All right, everyone, welcome to episode 78 of Tokyo Wave. We're your hosts, Aaron Randall
and Parker Allen. On Tokyo Wave, we bring you weekly updates from our studio in Harajuku.
Join us in segments featuring this week's top news,
political happenings,
business,
and other random garbage.
To get us started, here are this week's top news highlights.
Japan's go-to travel campaign to restart as early as January 2022.
U.S.-Japan relations in spotlight as Prime Minister Kishida plans raising defense spending.
Sony cuts PlayStation 5 production outlook due to component snag.
This week in Japan. Alright, so our first story, Japan's go-to travel campaign to restart as early as January 2022.
The Mainichi has reported that the Japanese government has decided it will restart Go-To Travel domestic tourism subsidy program as early as January 2022, depending on the progress of certain COVID-19 medications.
Figures in the tourism industry and others who have been hit by the coronavirus crisis had sought an earlier campaign restart, but the government has decided it needs to first see if oral medications to prevent COVID-19 symptoms can be approved for use by the end of 2021 this year. Proof of vaccination, negative tests, and other documentation are also expected to be part of the restarted campaign.
In the Go-To Travel campaign, the government subsidizes a part of individual vacationers' travel costs. The program began in July 2020, but it was suspended in December of the same year when coronavirus infections surged. I remember that because I was on Go-To the last day.
Yes, I think...
Slid right in there. Got my 50% discount.
Yeah, same here. I think like a month before it was canceled, I was able to go to Fukuoka. And that's when everyone thought the virus was like over. You know, we had overcome it.
Apparently it wasn't over.
At a nighttime press conference on November 10th, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said regarding the restart, "We will use vaccines and tests to create a safer and more secure system. I want to comprehensively review it and decide on a time for it based on a thorough examination of the state of infections."
The government hopes to have the oral medication in use by the end of the year. Furthermore, booster vaccinations for older people will begin in earnest in July 2022. A government source said, quote, "The important components for coronavirus countermeasures will come together by the end of January."
Some have pointed out that travelers tended to concentrate at major hotels and on weekends during last year's Go-To Travel. Who would have thought? In response, the government has decided the next round will include increased perks for weekday trips and stays at medium to small businesses, hotels, and inns.
Interesting point. Even now, of course, right now we don't have Go-To Travel, but especially these large resort properties are already seeing a large return to tourism levels as people are going on vacation and going to these resorts. The difference is that instead of going there and using that as a springboard and doing lots of, active going around and sightseeing and going out to eat and drink and have fun, people are staying inside the resort.
Staycation.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
whether it's in the city or whether it's in the countryside, that is sort of the main way that people seem to be traveling. So especially if Go-To is restarted, these small and medium-sized ryokans and hotels and whatnot are really at a disadvantage because people are not going there because when you stay at a place like that, usually, you're going to go out, you're going to go around. And places that really don't enable people to do that, smaller size accommodation facilities, they are sort of locked out of the current tourism pattern.
Right. Even myself, planning to go somewhere end of the year, we looked at big hotels because, we're thinking, we might have to be inside, right? So, yeah, even I fall into that pattern, I guess.
Up next, U.S.-Japan relations in spotlight as Prime Minister Kishida plans raising defense spending.
Coda News has reported that a senior U.S. diplomat said Tuesday that Washington would welcome an increase in Japan's defense budget, as signaled by Prime Minister Fumio Kishida amid China's growing assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific region.
Daniel Kreidenbrink, the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, said in an interview with Kyodo News, quote, "This is a decision for our sovereign Japanese allies to decide, but I'll be very clear. We would welcome increased Japanese defense spending, and we would welcome the opportunity to continue to coordinate with our Japanese allies on how we together can contribute to peace and stability across the region."
So the U.S. Assistant Secretary Daniel Kreidenbrink also said he believes that increased defense spending by Japan would make Asia more secure and more prosperous.
Also might be a few $1 billion here and there for certain U.S. defense contractors. Bada bing, bada boom. So the remarks came after the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, led by Prime Minister Kishida, retained a comfortable majority with its ally Komeito in the House of Representatives
Erection. It was a big erection. A very major erection.
Freud was right.
It's the biggest erection of them all.
It was a very long election that took place on October the 31st, with the LDP pledging to consider a doubling of defense spending to around 2% of Japan's gross domestic product.
While not a formal rule, Japan has long kept defense spending below 1% of GDP due to its pacifist constitution.
Kishida has vowed to beef up the Japan-US alliance with 100% USDA-approved beefy beef and deal with security challenges linked to China as well as North Korea, which recently carried out a series of missile tests using the thing that the US is the best at doing, of course, making tools of war.
Also in the news is Japanese politics scholar Gerald Curtis, who recently penned a op-ed criticizing Japan's perpetual eagerness to put new prime ministers in front of the US president. It's pretty true, actually.
And Dr. Curtis ain't having nothing to do with it. He was quite spicy in his remarks in a recent article for the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, saying, quote, "So what does he want to chat with Joe about? Nobody seems to know, and the Japanese mass media doesn't seem to care. What they want to know is whether Fumio is going to get inside the White House before the end of the year, and before Thanksgiving if possible." Curtis called for an end to superficial photo ops, saying, quote, "In the end, Biden may agree to invite Kishida to the White House since it seems so important to the Japanese government. But isn't it time for Japan to stop thinking of these quickly arranged and superficial dialogues with the US president as photo ops intended mainly to show the Japanese public that their new prime minister has got command of the all-important relationship with the United States? Fumio, you can do better." It's pretty scathing commentary, that.
For sure. Well, it is true that, new prime ministers and after new US presidents are elected, Japan and US do seem to kind of get together fairly quickly.
Yeah, I have to say, though, it's definitely a one-sided relationship, and it's always a situation where Japan is lobbying the US to get their guy in front of the US president. Right. I think that when this became a thing, of course, in the 1980s between Nakasone and Ronald Reagan, then it made sense. But now, with all of these, long-standing commitments and this sort of ironclad alliance, you would imagine that most things with US-Japan relations can pretty much go on autopilot. I mean, there's not really any divisive policy issues. So, does the Japanese prime minister really need to get in front of the US president? it's a little bit wishy-washy. And I think that the Japanese side sees it as this double whammy to where they can, of course, curry favor with the United States directly and also receive a boost in domestic popularity from the sheer image of seeing Japan's current prime minister on the quote-unquote world stage, meeting the leader of the free world and cheeseburgers.
Right. It's all a PR stunt,
But the problem is, even that part doesn't really work anymore. Suga went to visit Uncle Joe, and it didn't really do anything for him.
Yeah, it was Uncle Joe and the CEO of Pfizer, I think, were the two big meetings.
Exactly.
The Pfizer one might have actually helped out
But
a
it
bit.
didn't do anything for Suga's popularity. And I mean, he didn't really last a lot longer after that as, not a direct result, but it wasn't the magic bullet that the administration thought it would be. And so maybe Kishida has a PR stunt up his sleeve, but I mean, this is something that the Japanese public is quite used to seeing. And it's, it doesn't have the luster that it used to.
Right. All right, and up next, Sony cuts PlayStation 5 production outlook due to component snag.
Bloomberg reported that Sony Group has reduced its PlayStation 5 production outlook, that's right, again, for this fiscal year due to component and logistics constraints.
Sony has cut down the number of PS5 units assembled for the fiscal year to about 15 million from its previous target of 16 million units.
The development comes amid a global shortage of semiconductors, which is impacting companies including Sony.
In October, Sony, whose business spans areas including entertainment, sensors, financial services, and dildos, said it was on track to sell 14.8 million PS5 consoles this fiscal year, a target that takes into account the global shortages.
Gaming firms were taken by surprise last year by stay-at-home demand during the depths of the COVID-19 pandemic, which also, I would imagine, impacted their dildo business as well. But especially video games, they just couldn't keep them on the shelves because everybody was bored and needed something to do.
Yeah, it happened with the Switch as well. There was a Switch shortage, and the price, for everything, for all these systems, has skyrocketed.
Separately, Sony is partnering with Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC, to build a $7 billion chip plant in Japan.
Construction of the factory, which local media said last month would supply semiconductors to Sony's image sensor business, will begin in 2022, with chip production at the new plant slated to begin at the end of 2024.
Well, it's kind of funny because it seems in the past several years, everyone was talking about how Japan doesn't, manufacture these important things. Like, we don't manufacture LCD panels anymore. We don't manufacture semiconductors anymore. And this pandemic, of course, caused this supply chain kerfluffle, which has led to really an unthinkable situation, manufacturing actually coming back to Japan.
And it's very unfortunate what's going on with the PS5, and a lot of consumers are upset, but the pandemic actually caused a lot of gaming addiction in PS4s. So a lot of people that didn't even have game systems started playing games again, and PS4 was obviously readily available. If you look at Sony's stock too, it's steadily risen. It hasn't dropped dramatically due to this.
I mean, it blows my mind because, the PS5 has been out for more than a year now.
Yeah. And there's exclusives for the PS5, which is nuts. But I mean, the gaming industry, the developers have to, push and develop stuff that's, new and shiny because consumers expect that for newer and more expensive games to run on better hardware. So they're in a really, really tight spot.
I'm going to blow your mind. I said the PS5 has been out for more than a year. It actually released today, exactly 1 year ago. Yeah, November the 12th, 2020.
Whoa.
Which is the date of this recording session.
Crazy. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I remember. So everyone who reserved...
And you still can't buy one of the damn things.
Yeah,
oh my God.
You can't get it. Even in the US and here in Japan, the only people I know who got it reserved it like 6 months, a year in advance, which now wish I would have done. I saw a listing on Rakuten for PS5 for 10,000 USD.
Wow.
So that's 1 million yen. And I was like, damn, that's messed up. But also like, damn, it's worth that much. I bet somebody bought it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why it's that price, right?
Yeah. There's one of the most popular games to come out in the past 20 years, the Final Fantasy VII Remake. They made an updated version that was exclusive for the PS5. And people that are like hardcore fans of this game are obsessively trying to get the PS5 so that they can play it. And there's also a lot of other developers that have made exclusives for the PS5. So, yeah, I'd say go for Xbox. Right now, seriously, if you want the next gen hardware, Xbox is the way to go.
Or, you can wait until 5 years from now when they're finally making those chips.
Yeah, or just PC Master Race. Steam's going to kill it with their new device.
And up next on Let's Talk About Creative Stuff Time, we're going to take a look into the Coda Funk EP. 7 tracks of lo-fi hip-hop co-created by Aaron.
You're now listening to Tokyo Wave.
So today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to listen to this new EP, which Aaron has co-created, hear about what inspired him to contribute to this project. And also today we are joined by our frequent guest and resident music aficionado, Matt Ketchum. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Yeah.
Nice response.
So Coda Funk is a musical collective that has Mateen J and Aaron Asher Randall on keyboards, strings, piano, guitar, drums, and bass. Some songs on the EP feature Kinich Deshmukh on flute, and World Vibes, Lo-Fi Ambience, and Chill Out Electric Foundation are at the heart of what they are doing with Coda Funk. So, obviously, we're going to talk about the music. To talk about the music, let's listen to the first track. So, the first track is called Guardian Star.
Right. And Parker, before we start listening, I should say, and most of our listeners probably know, but the music we put in our podcast is all lo-fi hip hop. So that's kind of what we were going for. So people that are familiar with the kind of music we play during the intro and opening segments, that's kind of the genre that we were creating in.
All living things, every being that walks and breathes, each has its own star. When a life is born, a new star appears. That is the guardian star, the star that warms this planet.
Do you want me to talk about
The
it?
way that you said that made me sound like we've got like some serious like relational things to discuss.
So when I listen to that song, and you've let me hear that a few times in like different stages of its development, it feels like it's like the opening theme to a movie.
Ah.
And I feel like I'm coming into this new city and it's like space and it's kind of like The Fifth Element. It's got that sort of vibe.
Ooh.
I was actually wondering if that's obviously that's a soundbite that you were using about it, like welcome to the dark star where everything is wrong except for love or whatever. Where did you get that soundbite from?
That's from the famous anime Cowboy Bebop.
Oh, that's Cowboy Bebop?
Yeah. So that's a really cool scene. I think it's from the Cowboy Bebop.
You can say it. Come on.
It's from the Cowboy Bebop.
Cowboy Bebop.
It's from the Cowboy Bebop
Cowboy
movie.
Bebop.
No, but this is from the movie that came out in like the early 2000s, and it's a really cool scene where the lead character Spike is like talking to some old man around a fire, and the voice in that scene, I was like, damn, that's such a cool voice. So like, a trope in lo-fi hip hop is they take sampled dialogue from famous movies and anime, and they put it at the beginning and the end of songs, even throughout the songs. So, trying to stay within that genre, we pulled that and just messed around with it.
How does that, so in like a lot of the recordings, maybe not a lot, but in some of the recordings I've done for the bands that I've played in, we have like, sound clips from like whatever movie or whatever in the beginning. It's always kind of an afterthought of like, oh, wait a minute, wouldn't it be really cool if we just get some like rain and then like a vampire screeching or something? Does the way that you've did you like think of the sound bite and then you're like, oh, that's the one that we use, and then construct the song around it? Or like, what was that process like?
So I mean, I think I got the beat from my buddy Mateen, and as soon as I heard it, I was thinking about like how we do the EQ notch and then allow the soundbite to play. I'm like, man, we just need like a cool voice over this, like a deep, And
voice. Did it like come to you immediately, or?
Yeah. It is, and then I thought of Cowboy Bebop, because Cowboy, God damn it, I can't say the name of this fucking thing.
You're canceled.
Cowboy Bebop, the creator of Cowboy Bebop, the Japanese director, even said the best dub of the show was in English. And the voice actors in that dub, I mean, we probably all saw it on Adult Swim back in America because they showed it like in the early 2000s, super late at night. That dub is like amazing. It has really, really good voice acting. It's all out of LA and everything. So there's a lot of gems in the script, and Well, so you mentioned Mateen, and so I know like Coda Funk is mainly you and Mateen kind of collaborating together, and then of course bringing other artists into the collective. How'd you meet Mateen? Like how do you guys collaborate? So me and Mateen have known each other since we were freshman year in high school. He was a very energetic, fun guy, and he was very popular for being kind of a musical genius, because on this album we didn't do a lot of jazz, but Mateen is a jazz pianist, like a true jazz pianist, and he's been a jazz pianist since we were like in high school, and he's completely self-taught, and he just has always been kind of this amazing musical collaborator and resource. It's probably the easiest person to make music with that I've ever met in my life.
What do you mean by that? Like, because the composition process varies from pretty like from person to person. Like I know, for example, for myself, it's usually just me and my drummer, and I'm like, ugh, and then he goes, ugh, and then I'm like, oh yeah, okay, what about ugh? And then it just like eventually just coalesces into something.
Exactly. So yeah, your relationship with your drummer sounds like the relationship I have with Mateen.
Okay, that's actually encouraging, and that makes me feel better about myself.
Oh yeah. I think
it's like you're jamming together, right?
Yeah. Well, I always think about, because I mean, you're a talented musician who knows how to read like notation and stuff, whereas like I'm just a piece of shit.
What are you talking about?
Who like picks up a guitar and accidentally just like creates stuff. Well, so I always imagine like you sitting down and like with like sweat on your brow, with like pen in hand,
writing notes and shit,
like Mozart, like composing a score.
No. I never write anything out in sheet music. I've tried that process actually a couple times.
I bet it sucks.
Yeah, honestly, it's all about what is it? Kinetic. Using your hands to write. And having it, I also am a pianist to a certain extent, not at the level Mateen is at, but like when I'm writing things, I always start out on piano, and then I'll switch to guitar or switch to something else.
Oh, right. Yeah. Usually I compose mostly on acoustic. Cause I mean, at least for, metal, like mostly those are pretty, maybe not basic, but like there's a lot of classical and whatnot, and it ends up sounding mean only because of like how fast you're playing. And then, okay, three things: how fast you're playing, how loud it is, and the amount of distortion on it. But like the core product is like you don't need anything but an acoustic guitar to do that.
That's that's a perfect allegory to the way that a lot of stuff is done on piano. So yeah, I'd imagine with metal, acoustic guitar is your sketch, and then so it's the same. Yeah, so with what we do, piano is the sketch, and then we can build everything from that.
You know, it's really funny. I think when people think about piano, the instrument, they think about classical music, they think about jazz, they think about really formal, sort of even stuffy music. But
yeah,
I mean, even if you listen to like lo-fi hip hop and even some of the hardest like gangster rap songs, like the darkest, like dirtiest, like gangsta shit out there has got piano.
Oh yeah, it's all generated from more specifically, they would probably say keyboard. Right. Yeah.
Well, I think that's an interesting thing to point out too, is that I feel like there's stereotypes for specific genres, I think. And so having kind of juxtaposed or sort of jarring things that just don't fit the stereotype in there. And I mean, that comes down to a lot, I think, to like the timbre of a particular instrument. So, you got hard hitting gangster rap, but then you have this very sullen and kind of speckly, like very light, what's the word I'm looking for? Just like nice piano, soliloquy. There we go.
Soliloquy, yeah.
Coming in. And I mean, but that juxtaposition is like quite nice. Like it's interesting, right?
Yeah. And we live in a really interesting time with music production because for those who are listening know, and probably you guys as well, you can do everything on a computer and not touch a keyboard or guitar. You can program everything in MIDI.
Oh, wait, I got to interrupt. Soliloquy is totally the act of talking to oneself. So that is the wrong word that I used.
Good job.
Sonata. There we go.
Sinatra.
Yeah.
Bada bing,
Okay.
bada boom.
Anyway, sorry.
I'll break your legs.
I had to vindicate myself.
Well, so let's get back to the music. So after Guardian Star, the second track on Coda Funk is Greenish, which features flute from Kinich Deshmukh.
So the way we met this guy, Jacob Collier, a very famous jazz musician, does these hashtag Instagram contests where he will put out a like 8-bar, 16-bar, whatever piece of music and ask people to solo over it. So this guy, Kinesh, we heard his flute playing, and he plays the Indian variation of the instrument. It's called a ney. It's a wind instrument. Iran has their own variation as well. But this guy was insane. And so I messaged him and I'm like, dude, would you like to play on our stuff? Here's a link to it. And he got back immediately, and I think within like a day he sent me this. I know, it's so good. It's so good. It meshes so well. I mean, the dude has an amazing ear because, like, I sent it to him with no instructions, and he sent me back 4 different parts that were all layered. There's other flute parts that are kind of really, really like back in the mix, and they're just like adding rhythm and whatnot. But the dude is kind of insane.
Because you've never met this guy, right?
Never met him. We've never even done a call.
Whoa. Yeah. It's like this mysterious flute player.
Yeah.
I like that. He's got like a cape and like and like wanders the woods.
This guy's like in a totally dark
What if you
room
did
somewhere.
that? Somebody
just with
should
the flute.
do that. Just get a flute or any instrument really, and just go on like a 1 month pilgrimage somewhere and walk it, and just like every night you sit down on the side of the road and play some funky flute.
I bet some people are living that life. I mean,
I've met them with coronavirus. There were definitely a few people like walking from Hokkaido down to Kyushu who were coming through Yugawara. I was like, you're doing what?
Want to listen to my flute? So I noticed obviously the flute is super funky, but I also noticed there's like this, I almost thought it was a piano, but it's like this really bassy, like a contrabass or something. What is that?
oh, that's a upright bass, and all of that is done on the computer. It's not real. So actually, the only two things that are real in that track are the piano, which is out of tune, by the way, and the flute. And this is one of the tracks that I started messing with the tuning of everything. So, like between like a C and a D, there's 100 cents between each. So if you start detuning things, the human ear can usually pick up like after it exceeds like a 20 cent or 30 cent difference. And I just started messing, like really like not even thinking about what I'm doing, but messing with the tunings of other instruments to match Mateen's detuned piano.
How do you detune a piano?
You just let it sit there and don't tune it. And then
It takes years.
Yeah, it takes years. And actually, the cell phone that so the piano was recorded with the cell phone too, by the way.
What?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
crazy.
We with this record, we got really kind of, I don't know, experimental for good reason, because there's actually a lot of people now, guitarists and whatnot too, that are using cell phones, especially with lo-fi stuff, because if you go into an expensive studio and you track guitar, and then the mix engineer sits there for like a week trying to get a quote sound, I mean, you can just get that sound with an iPhone.
Oh God, I really don't want to comment on this, because what you're describing is exactly the opposite of what's happening in the metal scene right now. Everybody's so fucking obsessed with like as high quality as possible. Let's go to the studio and it's like, no.
Well, that's just not metal. That's what the EDM. So, I mean, and this probably metal is not included in this category, but it is probably some crossover. But all producers now are obsessed with everything sounding just so crisp and so clean, and it has this digital jagged edge that I personally cannot stand. It drives me insane.
Well, it's got no grit, and I'm not grit in like the metal sense of the word, but like it's not real.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Like a lot of the music that's come out, especially in the last decade, it sounds so good that it's almost off-putting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just like, and it all sounds the same.
It's almost like the audio version of when HD TVs first came out, and this frame rate went up, and everything looked like a soap opera.
Yeah. Yes. It's the uncanny valley of audio. And Parker, well, because you're like an audiophile, but the best stuff is the vintage stuff, and that's because it doesn't have the digital jagged edge. And when I say jagged edge, I literally mean like the audio files. If you zoom in on them at like a microscopic level, they're jagged edges. But if you're talking about like analog equipment and gear, the audio it produces is rounded and it sounds smooth, right? This is like, sounds from the 70s. Kind of going on a rant here, but a duo that's really popular right now, Bruno Mars, Anderson .Paak, their new stuff obviously is using a lot of this old school vintage technology.
I really wonder what kind of recording equipment they're using, because they really have that vintage sound, but obviously there's some digital in there somewhere. And at the end of the day, we're listening to it on YouTube. So I was like, whoa, this is weird. It sounds vintage, but it's definitely digital.
Yeah. So
Ooh, and actually that reminds me. So I was up or down rather in Oita recently, right? And I'm taking a bunch of field recordings, and one that I kind of serendipitously ended up getting is that the guy who was hosting me down there, Paul, the CEO of Walk Japan, mentioned very kind of vaguely like, oh, there's a music event. Let's go. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't know what it is, but let's do it. And so we roll up, and I guess maybe he didn't have details when we first decided to go, but as we're rolling up, he's like, oh, actually, it's an Orugoru like exhibition or like showcase thing. And Orugoru are basically like, I think they're German music boxes, like 1800s sort of stuff.
Like that music that they play in like Sweet's Paradise, where it's like ding, 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 ding. It drives you crazy.
Very like fantasy.
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And so the way he's describing it, he obviously looks very uninterested in all of this. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're taking me to like a music box exhibit? This is the best. And so I had my field recorder, and I ended up getting these honestly almost like hauntingly beautiful, very subtle and sparse recordings of these music boxes in the middle of nowhere, Japan, in this old temple, right? That
sounds like where like Chucky goes when he retires, right?
Yeah. But I mean,
I'm Chucky,
and that
music boxes.
analogness of it though was just amazing. And I was just ensconced with the entire experience. And there's Paul like back in the corner, just being like, "All right, when are we gonna go yet?" And I'm like, no, dude, I need to get another.
God, Tokyo really does make you go crazy.
No, that raw analog sound is so sought after right now. One of my friends here in Japan, an American guy, he spent like the past 7 years learning to mix and record live drums. And he's actually played with Uehara Hiromi, who performed at the Olympics. Opening ceremony.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So this guy's, pretty well known in the jazz world, and he's using his phone now. He rents a studio in Japan, and he records everything with a phone. And it's an iPhone 5.
Ooh, actually, I've got a very specific question for you.
What's up?
That I might be able to answer myself, but it's probably an interesting thing to talk about. So I use a Zoom H6 field recorder.
Oh, okay.
For a lot of kind of the audio work that I do. And it's a phenomenal product. Like, honestly and bluntly speaking, right now, there are exceedingly few, in my opinion, Japanese companies that anybody can be proud of. Zoom is one of them. Zoom makes outstanding audio products. I highly recommend, and they're like, I think it was like $400 or something. Phenomenal quality for what it is, right? But anyway, so I'm taking...
Except for their podcast soundboard. We used that for like a week, and it just did not work for what we were trying to do with it.
Yeah, we weren't like using it correctly, I think. Yeah.
So anyway, usually I'm using this H6, which is kind of bulky. Like, it's not massive, but it's almost the size of like a 1980s brick cell phone, if you know what I mean. And so a lot of the time I'm using that to get these field recordings, but there's kind of, and so with these field recordings, I'm making NFTs, right? And there's sort of two issues that I'm dealing with. Right now, I use the platform OpenSea.
Oh, nice. You're on OpenSea.
Yeah.
Cool.
Actually, Akiya and Inaka is. And so one of the issues is that currently anyway, there's a file size limit of about 30 megabytes.
Ooh.
And so with the field recorder, I mean, I can scale them down into MP3, but if I'm using like the actual WAV files, they're, 150 to 300 or so. So obviously too big, and I have to adjust that, right?
Yeah. You lose so much fidelity too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so there's that, just the file size. But another thing that's, I think, really, really interesting about the whole NFT thing and mixing it with like audio and field recording specifically is, it's non-fungible. It's like a permanent record of something that happened. And so with sound, especially like rural sound, I think it's just a cool concept of like, at a certain point, at a certain time, on a certain day, a sound in the forest was made. And you can never reproduce that and stuff, right? But where I run into not trouble, but like kind of a frustration with the technology that I'm currently using is that, at least with the H6, it doesn't have GPS tagging. It has timestamps. And so...
so a sound was created in the woods, but you don't know where.
Right. And so if you're going to put that on chain, what I'd want is to have as accurate a record metadata-wise of what the recording actually is. Because otherwise, if I'm saying, oh, it was taken on this mountain on this day, well, the timestamp's there, so the day is kind of legit. But so far as place, they're kind of relying on me to be truthful. right? It's not burnt into the metadata.
I will never tell you about my secret sound forest.
Yeah, right. And so the thing that I'm curious about is on iPhones, if you use a voice recorder, do you know if GPS metadata is also burnt into the file?
I have no idea, but I'd imagine it is because the photos are, right?
Yeah, right.
So back to the music, the third track on Coda Funk.
The fuck was that?
Hold on. I want to talk about the voicemail thing real quick. Sorry.
This is audio. It's music. It's audio. It's totally related. And the other thing too is iPhone sound files are much smaller than the H6.
So the iPhone's voice memos feature tracks your location. So according to Slate.com, Apple refers to this as location-based naming. This feature, which uses local Wi-Fi networks. So I think you have to be connected to some kind of
So
Wi-Fi.
if you're in the middle of nowhere, it might not work.
But I have portable Wi-Fi, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Really? Okay, so I should actually probably be capturing these field recordings with my phone and not the higher quality H6.
Or you could do it with both.
Yeah, but you'd still, in that case, what you'd be doing is using the iPhone as like proof verification of, hey, this is actually the legit deal. And then here's the high fidelity version, which doesn't have the GPS tracking in it. But if you match them up, it is an identical voice or sound file.
You know what would be wild is if you started and everyone started just taking recordings.
This is what I want.
Yeah, of places everywhere, right? And yeah, it's mapped out like to the T. You have the GPS coordinates.
That's the idea.
So
right?
then
Ultimately.
when people come here, that you can have some kind of app and you can kind of walk through and hear stuff, right? That happened at the location.
It's going to be like Pokemon Go. Everybody's going to be walking around with headphones on.
yeah.
And people are going to look at them like, man, those guys, are they like, what's wrong with them?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's just like a really cool concept. And I'm having a lot of fun doing it. Of course, nobody's bought anything yet, but
Well, if you're doing collections too, of especially of like certain kinds of animal sounds, I'd imagine that would be really, really hot.
goats.
Yeah.
I thought it was monkeys.
I don't have any monkeys yet. There's still not, I don't know where the monkeys have gone.
Sorry to stay on this topic so much, but when I first came to Japan in 2009 and we went mountain climbing and went up to temples, the sounds of the forest.
Yes, I have those recordings.
Those sounds were so insane. And I remember just sitting there for an hour listening. And someone else that was on the tour with me was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Do you not hear what's going on?" Like
Bro, I'm listening to the forest. Shut the fuck up.
like the forests in Japan sound amazing. So Matt, you're onto something, man.
Let me see if this will work. Here's our listings.
Man, you guys got me all like jazzed up. Now I want to go listen to the forest.
Dude,
Well, I'm about to show
it's
you.
one of the coolest things you can do. I mean, when I visited Kyoto last summer as well, the temple areas, just like the sound of water and the sound of the birds. Oh my God. The zen is off the charts.
Okay, here is the forest temple.
Forest temple.
In Kunisaki, Oita Prefecture.
I kind of want to start talking about the local environment using a very soothing voice that makes it sound like I'm on drugs.
A very soothing voice indeed. You too can own this file for only 0.473 Ether or $2,254.15.
It sounds gorgeous. It sounds gorgeous.
I know, but so I think that's really fun and cool. And yeah, so audio fidelity and file size and wave versus MP3 versus all of this stuff are also extremely relevant to the music production process.
Exactly.
So getting back to Coda Funk, the next track, Beaches of Etheria, not Ethereum, also features those funky flute sounds from Kinich Dishmook. kind of funny. It almost sounds like something you would hear in the forest or at the beach. You know, it's got a very sort of ambient vibe, just like, whoa.
We're definitely going for the down tempo.
I can just imagine, like, you know, Keanu Reeves sitting on the beach.
Eating a muffin, like by himself, sadly, of
Yeah.
course.
The end of the new Matrix movie. It leaked.
Oh,
That's what happens.
Oh, it did?
That's what happens, yeah.
So you heard it here first,
And you wrote
folks.
the song for it. Son of a-
The new Matrix movie sucks. Watch it suck.
No, but yeah, so we said lo-fi hip hop, right? But we ended up you know, what is it? Mateen is from Iran. Our flute player is from India, you know, and the flute player also is really into Japanese composers. So with this track, we were taking much more of like a game music approach.
Yeah, I get that vibe from it a lot.
Yeah, kind of like a scene in a game where you're in like this tropical Southeast Asian inspired environment.
So we don't have enough time today to cover all of the tracks on Coda Funk's new self-titled EP. We do encourage everyone to take a listen to it. It is available for free on SoundCloud. Check it out. Search Coda, that's Coda, Funk. If you don't know how to spell funk, I can't help you. Check it out. But really the biggest track as far as popularity right now is the 6th track, New Visions, also featuring that funky Indian flute. And it's already got almost 20,000 streams on SoundCloud. Let's take a listen to it. To say, like, we talked a little bit about jazz earlier in this discussion, and of the tracks on this new Coda Funk EP, this is definitely, at least in my opinion, the jazziest track.
For sure. We produced it like that as well. You know, gave it a proper acoustic drum set and an upright bass, which actually none of those are real. Those are all digital as well, with VSTs on the computer. The flute is real. The voice is also a vocal VST. It's not a real person singing.
Is the feeling real though?
I'd like to hope so.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Just wanted to make sure.
Chopped the crap out of it to get the groove and everything working right. But yeah, you know, this is one of the tracks where Mateen kind of took the lead on the chord progression, and he has a very, very deep jazz background. And our flute player also, I think, really resonated with that. This is where kind of the Chick Corea Return to Forever vibes come in.
And so, like, you were saying, like, you can't really put your finger on, like, one musical influence with Coda Funk, but there are, like, different influences that you may or may not be really kind of channeling when you create the music. But what are your influences, if you can really remember or kind of recall any of, like, specific, like, where did you get this idea for the sound from?
So Mateen and I think the first couple conversations when we started making music was we kept referencing Nujabes, right? I don't think the album sounds like Nujabes at all. It actually sounds completely different. And I think it's actually very difficult to mimic Nujabes sound. There's a lot of reasons for that. But kind of like using Nujabes as a barometer to help like write this stuff. there's a lot of electronic influences like Disclosure. There's a very famous Iranian group called Axiom of Choice, and they play traditional Persian music. Electronic artists like Taiko were a big influence. And then jazz artists like Chick Corea and another group that's really good, The Bad Plus, were really, really big influences.
It's funny with like whichever genre you identify with or whatever. Again, going back to like that stereotype thing that I mentioned earlier, people, it's like, oh, you're a metalhead, you only listen to metal. It's like, no, dude, like John Fogerty is one of my biggest, CCR is like a huge influence on like how I compose and write and like groove and swing and stuff. So like for things like this, I mean, I'm assuming that, yeah, Shakria and, kind of the obvious influences are there, but are there other kind of stylistic or like thematic influences that you think play into this that don't kind of jibe with the sound itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the guys I mentioned, Taiko. If you guys are familiar with Taiko at all,
I think it's like pre-vaporwave.
Pre-vaporwave, yeah. His best stuff was like 2011, 2012.
Okay, yeah, I'm familiar. Not that, but I know.
Really like meditative electronic music. So using synths to try to like, get people to relax. It kind of stuff. Meditation was a big. We talked a lot about meditation while we were making this EP as well, and we wanted it to be something that was meditative and healing for people. So that was a big influence on a lot of this.
Yeah, I have a personal affinity for almost like influences that don't sound like the thing that you're doing. Like for whatever reason, I feel like that's a more powerful kind of influence, specifically because it isn't so obvious why you consider it an influence. But if you do the mental gymnastics or whatever necessary to understand, oh yeah, that does make sense, I can see that influence now. Like to me, that's just a more kind of not comprehensive, but like it's more difficult to arrive at that conclusion. Thus, you have to think about it more. Thus, it's a more powerful and a stronger influence than just like, oh, you play rock and roll, I bet you like Motorhead.
This gets into a really interesting topic about art and the fact that everyone obviously has a different interpretation of something specific, right? So if we're talking about like archetypes, or like, let's use an example that everyone can understand. Batman. There's been a bunch of Batman movies, right, by different directors, and they're all very, very different, right? The approach that they use to make these films are very different. It's shockingly different. I mean, some of them might seem kind of cheesy. Some of them might seem too epic to certain people.
I think maybe the biggest difference, though, is that Michael Keane's Batman outfit did not have a movable neck. Yeah. And so in the movie, noticeably,
they use that
genius.
It became.
I did not see the Batman reference coming. It took me by surprise. Yeah. But it's so cool to listen to this EP, Coda Funk, and just think about, the different influences in there. And also, obviously, you've gone for this lo-fi hip hop thing, but it's also got this world music flair. It's detuned. It's something that sounds like you've heard it somewhere else, but you're not exactly sure. But obviously, it's brand new music, and it's really cool. Thanks for sharing it with us today, Aaron.
Yeah,
Great stuff.
Thanks for giving me the chance to.
And what's next for Coda Funk?
So we have a new single coming out at the end of this month, and our plan is to release between 1, 2, or 3 songs a month as singles via a really nice program called DistroKid. If anyone's looking to release some music.
I also use DistroKid.
It's amazing.
It's good, and cheap. It's not expensive at all.
Exactly, and you can easily split revenue with all of your collaborators. So.
Ooh, hey, here's an idea though. And in fact, the reason, going back to the NFT thing, the reason that I've been doing, or like the original reason anyway, now I just think it's cool, but the original reason I was doing field recordings on NFTs is my first idea, and what I still really want to do is have unique like single releases, like song releases as NFTs. But a lot of the bands that I was talking to were like, NFTs, what are those? Like, I don't know what this means. Like, and I was like, shit, I need a proof of concept. Field recordings. Okay, go. Have you thought about like maybe having unique or like special or private releases as NFTs of tracks that you've created?
I mean, we haven't thought about that yet, but
You will fucking now.
yeah. Now we will. It's definitely something to consider. Everyone's on NFTs now, so
Magic internet money is the future, man.
I think someone we had on the show, Jader, he recently had an auction, NFT auction.
He sold like an NFT for a lot of money, right?
I saw, I think it was like over 6 million yen.
Wow.
So I mean, people are paying for him,
Yeah, and that's maybe a conversation for another day, but like it really rubs me the wrong way that like pixel art is the thing that it's like, motherfucker, this is a unique goddamn recording from the middle of nowhere in Japan that you cannot reproduce or screenshot. Buy this. Why are you buying that stupid pixel pirate?
Yeah. One of my friends is like,
I think that's like the thing about NFTs though. It's just like they've become popular because they are memey.
True. Yes, very much so.
And I mean, I think that there is added value. It's sort of like Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin got popular a lot due to the sort of media frenzy around. Look at all these bros buying Lamborghinis.
BitConnect.
And it was crazy hyperbole and everybody thought they were a bunch of idiots, but it became mainstream because there was just this spectacle.
Yeah.
And actually, I've had people tell me that like, okay, cool, the audio thing is cool, but you should just make the neat pictures that you make, like turn those into NFTs. And so I should do that just from a sales point of view, but like the artist in me is like, man, that's fucking dumb.
It's meme marketing, guys. Meme marketing, I can just hear the conversations back in the US like, Mom, I just made 1.2 million on Sheepcoin. But honey, isn't that like a joke? Like you actually made money.
Shut up, Mom.
Look at this nyan card I bought. It was only $600,000. I'm going to make millions.
So, what's interesting though about NFTs with art, I think it's just kind of exacerbating the market that already existed for really high-end art, or expensive art. And it's really this game that I think a lot of people played who already had a lot of money, right? But now, because of NFTs and the huge growth, a lot of people were able to enter that playing field.
This is a complex conversation. I'm there.
We're already at an hour 10, so
yeah, I'll make it quick. I don't know. I don't know how to say this correctly, but like there is an argument for exclusivity in art.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay.
Because I mean, I think pixel art is probably a good example of the opposite argument of like democratization. It's like, okay, cool, everybody can do it. And there's like financial or at least monetary value associated with these things. But again, pixel pirates, like, is there actual like emotional artistic value associated with that?
Art. Also, I flung some poop at this canvas, and this is art too.
Yeah, right.
And it's 10 times as much, okay?
Exactly. So
Didn't
like,
the guy do that?
What was it?
a lot of people have done that. There's also, do you know Piss Christ? Look up Piss Christ. PISS space CHRIST.
We need, once Elon Musk invents time travel, we have to send like one of these NFT bros back in time to like show it to Andy Warhol.
Parker, you make me think that all these NFT bros are time travelers and they're just fucking with everything, especially the pixel pirate guys.
Yeah, fuck that. Relatedly, I was at the Mori Art Museum last night. That place sucks.
Like 300 years in the future.
Yo, before like all this crazy fusion technology, there was this thing called NFTs that actually started it and inspired it. Oh, what are NFTs? Yo, let's go back in time and check it out.
And like, yeah, it's like 300 years in the future and they're just like a bunch of furries.
So yeah, guys, thanks so much for letting me talk about my new EP. For anyone who wants to listen to it, it is available on all streaming platforms. And it's Coda Funk, CODA Funk. So please check it out and let us know how you like it.
Do you want to say anything in closing?
Buy Akia and Inaka's NFTs.
You heard the man.
They actually sound really good.
Thank you.
Sounds of the Forest.
Hey listeners, that's right, you listener right there.
Who do you think should be our next guest on Tokyo Wave? Let us know. Drop us a line at wave@tokyowave.jp.
We hope you enjoyed Tokyo Wave.
If you haven't already, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube.
Join us again next week on Tokyo Wave.